At 61, you don't expect a building to hesitate before letting you in. Not after 24 years of parking in the same garage, walking past the same security desk, swiping the same badge that's been clipped to your belt longer than some people in the office have been alive. That Monday morning in Dallas felt no different until it did. I swiped my badge. Red light. I tried again, slower, like patience might help. Red again. The security guard didn't look surprised. He glanced at his screen and said almost kindly, "Hold on. We're updating access this week." Updating access. He said it like you'd say the weather was changing. I stood there, a grown man in a press shirt, waiting for a door to decide whether I still belonged. On the third swipe, it turned green. No apology. No explanation. Just a quiet click of a lock that finally agreed to recognize me. Before I reached my desk, my phone vibrated. No subject line. One sentence. "Marissa wants to see you." Now, if you're watching this and you're my age, you know what that word does to your chest. Now means this conversation was already decided without you. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm a senior financial analyst for a regional medical network. Hospitals, clinics, numbers that don't forgive mistakes. I've spent most of my adult life making sure the math worked, so patients never saw the chaos behind it. And I know the rules of corporate America well enough to tell you this. Men over 60 aren't fired loudly. We're eased out, smiled at, thanked, transitioned. I sat down at my desk anyway. The office woke up around me, headsets clicking on, keyboards tapping, the smell of burnt coffee mixing with printer toner. Across the aisle, a younger analyst I barely knew was setting up at a workstation that used to belong to our team. A cardboard box sat by his chair, full of pens and branded notebooks, still wrapped in plastic. He nodded at me, polite, unsure. I nodded back. On my way to the elevator, I passed a glass-walled conference room. A familiar weekly meeting was gathering inside. For 15 years, my name had been printed next to Finance Update on the agenda taped to the glass. That morning, there was a blank space where it used to be. No announcement. No explanation. Just absence. That's how they start erasing you, quietly, so you can't point to the moment it happened. Marissa Collins' office was too bright, all windows and skyline. She was standing behind her desk, not sitting. No coffee. No small talk. "Daniel," she said. "Close the door." The click of it sounded final. Marissa was 56, head of operations, widowed, respected. People called her tough. I always thought she was just careful with decisions, with people, with herself. "We're making some adjustments," she began. Adjustments. Not cuts. Not problems. She slid a single page toward me. Bullet points. Timelines. Corporate English. "Lucas Brent is leading this," she added. I'd heard the name. 42. Brought in to optimize. Men like that don't say old. They say legacy. "You'd stay on for 6 months," she continued, "as a senior advisor." Advisor. The word looked generous until the next line. No direct reports. No final authority. Support the team while a new lead is elevated. In plain language, teach them everything, then step aside. Marissa met my eyes. "It's just a small change." I felt something tighten in my jaw. "A small change," I repeated. "For who?" She didn't flinch. "I didn't bring you in here to insult you." "Then why did you bring me in?" The question came out sharper than planned. She moved from behind the desk and sat across from me, lowering her voice like we were stepping out of a script we both hated. "Because if Lucas delivers this," she said, "he'll call it a favor. And because I need to know something before you answer." She looked at me the way people do when they're about to break a rule. "Do you still want to work?" she asked. "For real? Not as a formality. Not as a farewell tour. Do you still want a seat at the table?" No one asks you that at 61. They assume you're tired. They assume you're grateful for anything that sounds like respect. My mind went to men I'd seen before me. Cakes in the break room, speeches about loyalty, access quietly shut off before they reached their cars. Work wasn't just income. It was proof I still mattered. I thought about that missing line on the agenda. The safe answer was obvious. Accept the advisor role, keep the paycheck, disappear politely. Let them call it a small change. But another thought pushed through, heavier. If I said yes without question, I wouldn't just be agreeing to step back. I'd be agreeing with their version of me, a man already finished. What happens if I don't agree? I asked. For the first time, Marissa hesitated. Lucas will escalate, she said. He'll talk about continuity like you're already history. And if you push the wrong way, he'll label you difficult. Then she added quietly, but if you do nothing, Daniel, you'll become invisible this month. That was the moment. Not the paper. Not the title. The word invisible. I slid the page back toward her. I'm not deciding today. Her shoulders dropped, just a little. Good. At the door I stopped. Why are you telling me this? I asked. She looked past me, out at the city, then back. Because you deserve more than a polite exit, she said. And because if I pretend this is harmless, I'm complicit. I stepped into the hallway, my heart beating faster than it had all morning. My phone buzzed. Calendar update. That weekly meeting? Renamed. Finance transition check-in. Organizer, Lucas Brent. Then another email arrived, cheerful subject line, like a joke that wasn't meant to be funny. Quick sync. Lucas wrote, Daniel, let's connect today. I'd love your thoughts on the transition. I stood there, phone in my hand, watching people pass me like nothing had changed. And that's when it became clear. The choice wasn't about staying or leaving. It was about whether I'd let them rewrite the rest of my working life without me even in the room. The next morning didn't begin with drama. It began with something worse. Silence. Not the peaceful kind. This was the kind that settles in a room when people have already had a conversation you weren't part of. I walked onto the floor and felt it immediately. Chairs turned a second too late. Conversations paused, then restarted without me. No one was rude. No one was warm. I sat down and realized something that hits hard when you're past 60. When people stop needing you, they stop hearing you. I didn't open my laptop right away. I just sat there, hands folded, listening to the hum of the office. This is the sound of being slowly erased. Not fired. Not confronted. Just edited out. If you're watching this and you've ever felt it, you know exactly what I mean. At 9:17 a.m., a calendar invite appeared. 30 minutes. Glass conference room. From Lucas Brent's assistant. No agenda. That told me everything. Men like Lucas don't need agendas when the outcome is already decided. I hovered over decline longer than I should have. Declining would buy me time. Time, at my age, feels valuable. But it's also how people disappear. I accepted. While I waited, my thoughts kept circling back to Marissa Collins. Not the executive version everyone knew, but the woman I'd seen hesitate in her own office the day before. That pause hadn't been weakness. It had been calculation. People only hesitate when they have something to lose. The question was, how much? Lucas walked in exactly on time. Same confident posture. Same pleasant expression. He shook my hand briefly, already half turned toward the screen. Daniel, he said, I'm glad we could align. Align. That word always comes before someone moves you out of the way. He spoke smoothly, momentum, scalability, future-proofing. He talked about honoring experience while making space for what's next. He never once said my name after the opening sentence. Just the role, the function, the position. Then he did something small, something surgical. He adjusted the chair at the head of the table, not toward me, but away, then sat there himself. I'd led meetings in that room for years. He didn't apologize. He didn't even notice. That's how men like Lucas assert control, quietly, so you sound unreasonable if you object. He slid a tablet across the table, a revised org chart. My name was still there, but off to the side, smaller. Advisor. Peripheral. This gives you balance, he said. Less pressure. You've earned that. Earned. As if relevance were something you aged out of naturally. Who signed off on this? I asked. He smiled, polite and practiced. Leadership is aligned, he said. Marissa understands a necessity. Not agrees. Understands. There's a difference. As I walked out, he added almost casually, Think of this as your legacy phase. Legacy. Past tense. That was the moment something in me almost gave in. Almost said yes. Almost chose comfort over visibility. I drove past my exit that afternoon and kept going until I ended up sitting in a grocery store parking lot, engine off, watching people load bags into trunks like their lives were stable. My phone buzzed. Marissa, are you okay? I stared at the message. Saying yes would have been easy. Instead, I typed, we need to talk. Somewhere neutral. She sent an address. Her house. No office. No witnesses. Her kitchen was quiet, personal. No awards on the walls. Just photos of her daughter from years ago. We sat at the table like two people stripped of titles. Lucas met with you, she said. I nodded. He said you understand the necessity, I replied. Her jaw tightened. That's his word, she said. Understanding is what he expects right before compliance. Then she told me what she hadn't told me before. The board had tied her own evaluation to the success of this transition. Smooth process, she stays. Resistance, she's labeled ineffective. I'm not protected, she said quietly. I'm just closer to the edge than you think. That was the shift. Not romance. Something heavier. Mutual risk. She wasn't asking me to fight for her. She was telling me the truth, so I could choose with open eyes. The safe move was clear. Accept the advisor role. Let the system close gently around me. The dangerous move was clearer still. Force visibility. Make the transition measurable. Documented. Shared. I didn't decide in her kitchen. I decided later, alone in my car. Fear didn't stop me. It focused me. The next morning, I submitted a request for an independent operational review. Formal. Transparent. Impossible to bury quietly. By noon, the floor felt different. People started stopping by again, carefully, testing whether I was still real. Marissa didn't text. Distance was her armor. As I shut down my computer that evening, my hands were shaking just enough to notice. For the first time since this started, I wasn't sure if I'd just reclaimed my relevance or accelerated my exit. And that uncertainty followed me all the way to the parking garage, where my badge hesitated again before turning green. I didn't get the warning in a meeting. I got it in an email blast sent to the whole division, like a memo about holiday hours. Subject line: succession and continuity. That's the kind of phrase that sounds responsible until you realize it's being used as a polite replacement for a person. I opened it at my desk with my coffee still too hot to drink, and there it was in black and white. My name, my role, my transition timeline. If you're watching this and you've ever been on the wrong side of corporate language, you already know what your stomach does before your brain catches up. Lucas Brent wrote it himself. 3 paragraphs of gratitude, 2 paragraphs of strategic alignment, and 1 neat bullet list that made my life look like a project plan. He didn't say I was being pushed out. He said I would be supporting continuity initiatives as a senior advisor, while the next generation finance lead stepped forward. Next generation. Like I was a model that had reached the end of its warranty. And then the part that turned my office into a quiet theater. Lucas added, please join me in thanking Daniel Harper for his decades of service. Decades. Past tense. My coworkers didn't look at me right away. They looked at their monitors, then at their calendars, then anywhere else, as if eye contact might make them complicit. Someone's team's notification chimed twice. A printer word. The world kept moving, and I felt myself being left behind in real time. For a few minutes, I just sat there. Not frozen, calibrating. At 61, you learn to hide the first wave. The first wave is humiliation. The second wave is anger. The third wave is fear, and that's the dangerous one, because fear makes you do small, obedient things you later regret. I watched a young analyst walk by with a folder pressed to his chest like a shield. He slowed near my desk and said too brightly, "Hey, Daniel saw the email. Congrats on the advisor thing." He meant well. That made it worse. I forced a smile. "Thanks," I said, like this was an award. A few desks away, 2 women stopped talking when I stood up to refill my water. They didn't turn their backs, they just softened their voices, the way people do around a hospital room. I could practically hear the sentence they were swallowing. He's on his way out. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A meeting invite from Lucas. 15 minutes. His office. No option to decline. That's another trick they use. They make the invitation look automatic, so you feel childish refusing it. I stared at the invite, thumb hovering, and for a split second I considered ignoring it, staying put, pretending I hadn't seen it. Then I pictured my own silence being used against me. Daniel didn't even show up. Daniel isn't engaged. Daniel is fading. So I stood up. When I walked into Lucas's office, he was by the window, Dallas spread out behind him like a chart he could edit. He didn't offer me a seat at first. He let me stand there an extra beat, just long enough to remind me who was in control. Then he gestured to a chair, not the comfortable one, the one closer to the door. Daniel, he said, I wanted to be transparent. Transparent. The word executives use when they're about to make your future sound inevitable. He tapped the email on his screen. This is good, he continued. It frames your legacy appropriately and gives the team clarity. My legacy, I repeated. While I'm still here. Lucas smiled like I'd made a charming joke. You are here, he said, and you'll be invaluable in the handoff. But the organization needs momentum. The market is changing. Healthcare margins are tight. We can't afford friction. There it was again. Friction. That's what they call experience when it refuses to be quiet. I kept my voice even. You listed a next-generation lead. Who? Lucas didn't answer directly. He turned his tablet toward me and slid it across. An org chart with a name highlighted, Evan. 31. Smart kid. I'd trained him on half the reporting systems. He now took credit for understanding. Evan is ready, Lucas said. And frankly, Daniel, this gives you something too. Balance. A dignified runway. Dignified runway. As if I were an airplane being guided off the active runway, so newer models could land. I felt the choice again, sharp and immediate. I could swallow it, smile, become the gracious older man who understands, and keep my reputation intact. Or I could push back and risk being branded difficult, bitter, unsafe. In corporate America, the moment an older man shows emotion, it gets rebranded as instability. I could already imagine the whispers. He's not taking it well. He's making it awkward. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I didn't look, but I knew who it was. Marissa had a way of checking without hovering. One short message at the edge of your day. Her kitchen table honesty was still in my ears. If you do nothing, you'll become invisible this month. So I did the one thing Lucas wasn't expecting from someone my age. I didn't argue about feelings. I asked for accountability. Show me the risk analysis, I said. The one that says replacing me with Evan reduces risk. Show me the failure modes you're willing to accept. Lucas blinked once. Just once. Then his smile tightened. Daniel, he said, this isn't a debate about you personally. It is, I replied. Because you made it personal when you put my name in a mass email like a retirement announcement. He leaned back, hands folded. Let's not dramatize, he said. You're being offered respect. Respect. Another word that sounds generous until it's used as a muzzle. I stood, but I didn't raise my voice. I'm proceeding with the operational review, I told him. Transparent, documented, shared. If we're changing structures, we do it with facts, not phrases. Lucas's eyes stayed calm, but his tone cooled. Be careful, he said. Reviews create noise. Noise creates concerns. Concerns reach the board. I nodded as if I'd been warned about the weather again. Then the board will see the truth, I said. Outside his office, the hallway felt narrower than before. People watched me from behind glass. Not openly, through reflections, through the thin politeness that pretends not to stare. I could feel my pulse in my throat, and I hated that they could probably see it in my hands if they looked closely. Back at my desk, my unread message finally lit the screen. Marissa. Just 3 words. Don't do this alone. No hearts, no comfort, no promise. Just a line that sounded like an order and a lifeline at the same time. Then another message appeared from an unknown number. He's furious. Don't let him isolate you. No name. No signature. Just that. I stared at my inbox as it refreshed, and a new email slid into view from Lucas with the subject line, "Immediate update to access protocols." I didn't open it. I couldn't. Because I already understood what it meant. The next move wouldn't be about budgets or org charts. It would be about control. And once someone starts tightening control, they don't stop until you either kneel or you break. The first thing I lost wasn't my role. It was proximity. In the days after the email, after the warnings, after the word access started floating through the building like a quiet threat, people began keeping a careful distance from me. Not avoidance, something more polite than that. A respectful gap. If you've ever stood too close to a fire and then stepped back just enough to feel safe, you know the distance I mean. I arrived early, left on time, and somehow felt later than everyone else. The office still sounded the same, but it no longer leaned toward me. It leaned away. Marissa stopped texting. Not abruptly. Not cruelly. She simply narrowed the channel. No quick check-ins. No kitchen table honesty. When we crossed paths in hallways, she nodded the way executives nod when other executives are watching. Professional. Contained. It would have been easier if she'd warned me. Instead, the silence grew until I started questioning what I'd misunderstood. That's the most dangerous part of this stage, not the opposition, but the quiet that makes you doubt your own judgment. The operational review moved forward without fanfare. Too cleanly, in fact. Requests for data came in, were fulfilled, acknowledged, then disappeared into folders I couldn't see. Lucas stopped scheduling meetings with me altogether. That alone told me something. He no longer needed to persuade me. When someone stops trying to convince you, it's because they're trying something else. Control doesn't always come with raised voices. Sometimes it arrives as administrative calm. One afternoon, I found my calendar mysteriously light. Meetings I'd been copied on for years were no longer there. No alerts. No explanations. I checked my access permissions, still active, technically. But functionally, I was being moved to the edge of the map. I sat at my desk longer than necessary, pretending to review documents I already knew by heart, just to see if anyone would notice. No one did. That was the moment the thought appeared, uninvited and unwelcome. Maybe I should have taken a runway. The dignified exit. The clean farewell. There's a seduction to it when you're tired. When your name becomes a complication instead of a contribution. I pictured myself shaking hands, smiling for a photo, telling people I was ready for the next chapter, even though I didn't know what that chapter would be. Comfort has a voice. It tells you this is as good as it's going to get. That evening, I went home and stood in the doorway longer than usual, keys still in my hand. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask anything from you. I poured a drink and didn't touch it. Sat at the table and stared at my phone, half expecting it to light up with an explanation from Marissa. It didn't. I told myself she was being careful. I told myself distance was strategy. I also told myself she might have decided the risk was too high. All three could be true. The problem was only one of them required me to do something next. The next morning, an envelope waited on my desk. Not an email, an envelope. Inside was a printed memo about temporary workspace reassignment. My office, modest, but mine, was being converted for team use. I was to relocate to a shared desk near finance support. No deadline. Just a sentence at the bottom. Effective immediately. That's how they do it when they want to see if you'll flinch. If you'll pack quietly and prove you understand the message without forcing them to say it out loud. I didn't move. I sat there and read the memo twice, then folded it and placed it in my drawer like a receipt. People passed by. A few glanced in, saw me still at my desk, and kept going. The shared space was already set up, monitor, keyboard, chair. Waiting. All I had to do was stand up and carry my things 10 steps down the hall. 10 steps can feel longer than a mile when you know what they represent. That afternoon, Marissa finally appeared. Not in my doorway. Not at my desk. She stopped a few feet away, where we could speak without looking like we were speaking. "We should be careful," she said quietly, eyes forward. That was all. No apology. No reassurance. Just a line drawn in air. Then she walked on. I felt something sink in my chest, not betrayal exactly, but loss. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that just is. For the first time since this began, I considered stepping back. Not because I was wrong, but because I was tired of being alone in it. Visibility has a cost, and I was starting to pay it in small humiliations. The lighter calendar, the shared desk, the professional distance from the one person who knew the truth. I asked myself a question I hadn't wanted to ask before. How much dignity is left if you fight and still lose? I didn't get an answer that night, but I did get an email. Not from Lucas. Not from Marissa. From the board's audit committee. Subject line, request for clarification. They wanted to review preliminary findings from the operational review before the next executive session. That meant the noise had reached exactly where Lucas said it would. It also meant something else. Someone had been listening. I sat back in my chair and felt the room again, not leaning away this time, but holding still. The distance wasn't gone, but it had changed shape. Whatever Marissa was doing, it wasn't abandonment. It was cover. I understood it now. Too late to thank her, and too early to know if it would work. The internal choice came quietly, without drama. I could accept the reassignment, fade with dignity, and let the board read whatever version of events reached them secondhand. Or I could stay exactly where I was, desk and all, and make sure the truth arrived intact, even if it cost me the last bit of comfort I had left. I closed the drawer with the folded memo still inside. When I shut down my computer that evening, I didn't carry anything to the shared desk. I left my office light on and walked out, aware of every step. The shift wasn't loud. It was internal. I no longer needed Marissa to stand beside me. I needed her to do what she'd been doing all along. Protect the space until the truth could walk in on its own. As I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed once. A single message. Tomorrow will feel worse before it feels clearer. No name. No explanation. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. For the first time in days, the silence didn't feel like disappearance. It felt like the pause before something breaks, or finally gives way. I ironed my shirt the way my father taught me, slow and deliberate, as if a crisp collar could keep the world from sliding. It was the morning of the board session, and the house was so quiet I could hear the iron hiss. No pep talk. Just one question. Do you walk into a room that's already decided your future, or do you let it decide without you? Dallas looked indifferent on the drive, sunlight on glass, traffic flowing, people living their lives. I parked in the same garage and took the same elevator, but I held my badge in my hand instead of clipping it on. At the lobby gate it hesitated, then turned green. The guard didn't speak. We both knew today wasn't about access to a building. It was about access to dignity. Upstairs, my office light was still on from the night before. The envelope about temporary workspace reassignment stayed in my drawer. I didn't move my things. If I gave up my desk before the board heard the facts, I'd be agreeing with Lucas's story, that I was already in the past. The audit committee's email asked for preliminary findings. That meant someone on the board didn't like being sold a clean narrative. So I prepared the only way I know, facts. I printed a risk map, system dependencies, compliance exposure, the places where experience isn't a luxury, but a safeguard. I kept it plain. No drama. Just consequences. At 10:30, Marissa Collins appeared at my doorway for the first time in days. She didn't step inside. She stayed in the hall, where anyone passing could see a professional exchange, and nothing more. They moved the session up, she said softly. Lucas wants this done before lunch. Her voice was steady, but her finger tapped her folder like she was counting seconds. Are you ready? She asked. I could have said no. I could have accepted the shared desk, the advisor title, the graceful fade. Peace is tempting at 61. Peace tells you to stop fighting so you can sleep. But then I pictured that email, succession and continuity, and the way my coworkers looked everywhere except at me. I felt something settle in my chest that wasn't anger. It was a decision. I'm ready, I said. Right then. The boardroom was all polished wood and bottled water lined up like props. Lucas Brent stood near the screen confident, smiling as if he were presenting a growth plan and not a person's life. Evan, the young analyst, sat with a laptop open, posture eager, eyes careful. I didn't blame him. He was being offered a future. Lucas opened with efficiency modernization, talent pipeline. Then he clicked to a slide titled Continuity. Daniel's experience has been invaluable, he said, and this transition honors that while ensuring momentum. He nodded toward the chair set for me like he was placing me in a display case. The audit committee chair, calm face, sharp eyes, cut in. Mr. Harper requested this review, she said. We'll hear his findings before we proceed. Lucas's smile held, but it tightened at the corners. I stood. I didn't clear my throat. If you want to be heard at my age, you stop asking permission to exist. I'm not here to argue about my job, I began. I'm here to talk about operational risk. I held up the risk map. When you remove institutional knowledge, you don't just remove a person. You remove memory. And memory keeps you from repeating expensive mistakes. I walked them through 3 areas. Compliance reporting. Deadlines that don't care about optimism. Payer forecasting. Assumptions that look harmless until reimbursement shifts. Cross-department workflows. The informal fixes that aren't written anywhere but keep clinics running on Monday mornings. Evan is capable, I said, meeting his eyes for a second. But capability isn't the same as context. Context takes time. Someone asked, are you saying we can't transition? You can, I said, but not by pretending a handoff is a ceremony. A real transition has safeguards, authority, and accountability. Right now, the plan makes me decorative and makes the new lead exposed. Marissa spoke, and the room changed. This isn't about keeping Daniel because we feel sentimental, she said. It's about how we treat experience as an asset instead of a cost. If we turn senior staff into quiet exits, we teach everyone that loyalty has an expiration date. That culture becomes a risk. Lucas leaned forward. With respect, he said, we're not running a museum. The word finally showed the teeth under his polish. I didn't flinch. No, I said calmly. You're running hospitals. And hospitals don't get to learn the hard way. The committee chair asked one final question. Mr. Harper, if the board authorizes a revised structure, what are you willing to be accountable for? My internal choice came right there. Take the safe lane and ask for comfort, or take the harder lane and accept responsibility. I'll be accountable for a structured handoff, I said. 12 months. Clear milestones. Documented training. Shared sign-off on critical reports. If those milestones aren't met, I'll step aside, cleanly, with the work finished. There were no speeches. After a short, closed discussion, the chair looked up. We're pausing the current timeline, she said. Mr. Harper will remain in an operationally accountable role during a structured transition. Ms. Collins will oversee governance. She glanced at Lucas. And we'll review succession communications. When the room emptied, Marissa stayed behind for a moment. No romance. No promises. She simply exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Thank you for not making me lie, she said. I nodded. Thank you for protecting the space, I answered. On my way out, Evan caught up to me near the elevators. He looked like he'd aged a year in an hour. Daniel, he said, I didn't ask for that email. I didn't know he'd turn it into an announcement. I could have made him the enemy. It would have been easy. Instead, I chose something harder. Then don't inherit his habits, I told him. You're capable. But leadership means learning the whole room, not just the spreadsheet. He nodded once, tight-lipped, and let me pass. Back at my desk, I clipped my badge on again. The light above my door looked the same. But inside me, something had shifted. Not because I'd won, because I refused to disappear politely. And if the day comes when I do leave, it won't be because someone smiled and called it a small change. It will be because the work is done, and I chose the moment myself.